I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I overcame the hurts from PTSD, and I'm currently working on anxiety. And my name is Maria. Tonight, I'm giving the word of encouragement on first step. Are you struggling to create your dream life or business? If so, you're probably distracted by the how. What you should be focusing on instead is identifying your calling. I know firsthand that nothing else matters if you aren't following your soul's purpose. Once you've found it, you can align all areas of your life to point in that direction. It is possible to do what you love and live in flow. You just need the right motivation and mindset and to take the right action. It starts by living out your purpose with the first step, which is understand what life should feel like when taking that first step. Living on purpose means doing what truly matters to you in alignment with your values and beliefs. I can't tell you what that means for you, but you know it when you feel it and when you don't. Hebrews 11:1 tells us, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see." A little further down in Hebrews 11:6 says, "And without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him." When you aren't being you, everything is foggy and colorless. You're bored and busy at the same time, always tired. Even small things feel like work. You may take tests to understand why you feel down and possibly pills to fix it. The list can go on and on. If you continuously ignore your higher purpose, it will send you nudges to get your attention. When you are in alignment with God and give all your cares to God regularly, often, life feels right. Things are easy and everything just works. You feel alive, passionate, and lit up from within. You aren't concerned with how to get to where you're going. You're sure of yourself, even if you're scared at the same time. For example, a baby takes his or her first step. The baby is a little scared, but dares to go for it. After a few falls and stumbles day after day, the baby knows when it feels right to run. It takes practice to get there, running, but it all started with that first step. All it takes is that first step, and understanding what life should feel like in that first step is the icing in the cake. For me, when taking that first step, I am honest with myself and humble at the same time. And it is hard, but I persevere. For example, I just started a new job about 6 months ago. I am still scared to make a mistake. Humbly pray, da- Humbly pray every day and taking that first step at work. I know what I feel like. I know what it feels like to do the right thing at work. Some days is foggy, colorless, feeling down, and other days I am soaring, getting the work done like a star. And I understand why. All it takes is having that first step and standing in faith. I give it to God every morning before I start my job. I stand on faith and I am confident God will get me through the day. By the end of my day, it feels good and I feel accomplished, which is how I'm supposed to feel, and I know it. That first step is very important, and being in alignment with God is the best. If I had not taken that first step in alignment with God, I would be miserable at work and failing to meet expectations required by my job. I would be a nervous wreck and feel desperate for my workday to end. I would be, I would, I would be, I would have dreaded to wake up in the morning for work. I would have not been in the right place mentally and emotionally. In conclusion, taking that first step is hard, just like a baby learning to walk or me at my new job. It can be scary, but is rewarding in the long run. It is much easier with God than doing it alone, and it sure feels right when all goes well. Now, don't be afraid to take that first step to live out your purpose. Thank you for letting me share.
I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I have struggled with the hurts of rejection, the hurts of abuse. I have struggled with the hang-ups of not feeling like I was good enough, like I was adequate, or like I was competent enough. And I struggled with the habits of trying to people please and over perfect and do all these things to get the affirmation that I feel I needed. My name is Jay. Can you guys hear me? Good. Somebody said AM radio. Okay. My brothers in the tech, they got me. They're going to get me right. Yes. So in the meantime, I don't know how many people know this about me, but I'm from North Carolina. Any other North Carolinians in here? Anybody? No, it's just me. All right. I'm from a small town. This town is actually called Asheboro, but I lived in Greensboro for the majority of my life. And I bring that up because when I'm in North Carolina, which is where I did everything, went to school, went to high school, met the love of my life, went to college in North Carolina, did all these things, and got married in North Carolina. Never thought I would leave North Carolina. I was very active in the church that I was participating in, that I had joined. I did a lot of stuff in church. I was part of the music ministry and the music team, and I thoroughly loved everything I did. Nothing about it was a job to me. So I worked a regular daytime job, then I did a part-time job doing music, and life couldn't be better. I got to tell you, in a way, I feel like I was living a dream because it was just me, and I'm newly married, and we already had one child, and now we have three all together, and God had blessed us in such a way where my wife was actually staying at home and homeschooling our kids, and I was able to still pay the bills and do all this other stuff, and so I gotta tell you, I'm grateful. I was very grateful. The problem came for me. I was sitting at work one day, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, why do I feel like it's something more? I was struggling, and I made good money. And I kept telling myself, it's got to be something else. Something else is happening right now. And so I would apply for another job and get a promotion, and I'm thinking that this is what I need. That's what something more means I need another title. Something more means I need more money. The problem with that is I got more money, I got more titles, I still struggle. And I felt like I just was missing something. And so now I'm playing more music. I said, maybe it's musically. I started to expand my musicality and do other things musically with different groups. And I still found myself longing for something else. And then all of a sudden, a position opened up in Texas. 3 of them, one in Houston, one in Dallas, and then one in San Antonio. And my boss, my manager came up to me and said, hey, you ever thought about relocating to Texas? And I said, no, not at all. And he said, well, it might be a good opportunity. You know, you could be over this particular training organization. And I said, yeah, I've never lived outside of North Carolina. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that. But, I'll pray about it, see what God say about it. And, I normally pray about things. I don't know how many people have their own agendas out here. Sometimes I have my agenda, meaning that I met a beautiful girl, so I'm praying, God, I pray that she's the one. I'll do that type of thing. Or, God, I pray I pray that you bless my kids today. So now I'm like, God, if this is you, I pray that you bless it. I'm going to apply just so I can say I applied and do this. And I was still struggling. And then part of me felt what I call a disruption. I felt I didn't have peace staying where I was at. I felt that the thing that gave me the security that I used to have was no longer there. And so I'm studying my Bible, and I shared this with my wife, and I started reading in Matthew, and I was reading the story where the disciples were in the boat, and they saw Jesus walking in the water, coming towards them. And then one of the disciples, Peter, says, Lord, I bid if it's you, I bid you to tell me, invite me to get on the water. And Jesus says, come. And sure enough, Peter leaves his comfort zone of the boat and takes a few steps on the water. This dude is literally walking on something that's impossible. He's walking on the water. The only other person doing this is Jesus. Now, essentially what happens, his faith fails, and then all of a sudden he starts to sink, and he cries out to Jesus and says, oh, Lord, save me. And Jesus, like he does to all of us, he comes through, and he saves him. He said, oh, if you wouldn't have doubted, you had a little faith. And I read that scripture, and I kept saying, God, am I stuck in this boat? So I'm sitting here right before church service starts in North Carolina, in Greensboro, and I've been praying about this, and I'm studying, and everybody's in prayer, walking around the sanctuary, and I remember being there, and then as I look up, a brother taps me on my shoulder. Now, the only person I've shared this with is my wife. So the brother taps me on my shoulder and says, brother, I don't know what's going on with you, but I think God is telling you to get out of the boat. And so when he said it, I jumped like, oh my God, are you kidding me? He just told me to get out of the boat. So, I'm being very emotional at this time. I'm like, oh my God, I think God is speaking, because he didn't know anything that I had been reading. He didn't know anything that I shared with my spouse. He knew nothing. And he tells me God's telling me to get out of the boat. So this disruption in life causes me now to rent out my house, apply for this job. If it's God, I'll get it. I got it. Relocate to Texas. Had to stay here 6 months by myself because the kids were in school, and because I'm still paying bills in Greensboro, I had to rent a room into a stranger's house I didn't even know. And all of this is because I felt that God wanted me here. So I tell that story because I have a strange feeling that some of you are just like me. Some of you are probably in this season where you can't really put your hand on it. It's indescribable. It's kind of nebulous if you think about it, where it's like, yeah, it's something that I'm supposed to be doing, and it's definitely more than what I'm doing, but I don't know what it is. And so I'm trying to, tonight, we're going to talk about what is that? What is that disruption? What is that thing that seems to be bigger than me? There was a little girl named Agnes that was born in Macedonia. And this little girl, Agnes, she, as a young age, she had identified her gifts. Her gifts were gifts of serving. She loved to help people as a child. That's what she did. So by the time she was 18, she actually went and joined a convent of other nuns. So she said, I'm going to serve in this area where we help those poor children who need education. She felt that she was in the prime of her life in giving God everything. Craziest thing. Fast forward a few years, this lady is riding a train on her way to the convent, and all of a sudden, what she describes as a call in the middle of a call from God. She says that God tells her to go to Calcutta. This is pretty deep. Calcutta is where the poorest of the poor were living. It's one thing to be in the Loreto convent. It's another thing to be in Calcutta. Guess what little Agnes did? Anybody willing to guess? She went to Calcutta. That's right. She went to Calcutta. The crazy thing about her going to Calcutta is she didn't know what she was going to do when she got there. She just knew she was there to go help anyone who was struggling, help those who needed food, help those that needed medical attention, help those who were sick, who needed all these different things. She was there to help, and that's exactly what she did. Now, when she got there, she had a handful of volunteers that they were serving with her. The thing that made it a God moment for her is that she did it anyway. There were no directions. She left an organization to go to a place that didn't have an organization, and she just did what God told her. An amazing story, little Agnes. Now, little Agnes, I failed to tell you, her name is actually Mother Teresa. Everybody's familiar with Mother Teresa, right? When I say Mother Teresa, what are some of the things you guys think about? Let me hear you, because I got to be interactive. I'm not up here talking all night. Mother Teresa and what? Self-sacrificing. What else? Servant. I love that. Self-sacrificing and servant. Remember with Mother Teresa, she's known for giving her all and her compassion for those who don't have. That was Mother Teresa. So think about that. She left what she knew based upon a higher calling than she had to do something that she didn't have all the instructions on doing. She had to take the next step. You know, one of my favorite quotes from Mother Teresa is, we're not called to be successful, we're called to be faithful. I'm gonna say that one more time. We're not called to be successful. We're not called to make a lot of money. We're not called to be famous on IG. We're not called to be all of this in front of other people, but we're called to be faithful to the purpose that God has over our life. So keeping that in mind, the purpose that God has over our life, you've heard Pastor Rod, and last week you heard Deacon Brandon tell us that we're looking for a North Star. We're looking for a compass. When we don't have directions, a street-by-street telegraph of what we should do, we should always focus on what is the direction that we should be going. Where's the North Star at? So the North Star for us is something I think we often miss. So earlier I asked how many people set an agenda every day here? Raise a show of hands. Agendas in here, daily agendas. Okay, good. So how many people follow that agenda to the T? Smaller show of hands, okay. How many people make an agenda, but there are disruptions throughout their day because stuff happens, right? A large show of hands. So imagine in your life, as a Christian, we need a God-centered, fixed, eternal, biblical, global, world vision that you can reverse engineer your life to. It's a lot of words. Now, I chose that definition because essentially I'm saying we need a North Star or a purpose for our lives that allows us to re-engineer our lives to fit within God's plan. Lots of times we get busy because I go to medical school or I'm in law school or I am a teacher or I'm a police officer, and we see that as our God-given purpose. But the truth of it is those are just the things that we do. Those are like what I like to call assignments. And we'll talk a little bit more about assignments later. I do know personally, though, I statements here, when I lose my North Star and focus on just the tactical stuff, when I lose that overarching mission that I believe God is calling me to, and I focus on the everyday tactical stuff, I end up walking in circles for 40 years trying to get to a promised land that I could have gotten to in a few months if I'd paid attention to my compass, to my North Star. So if you think about that, think about the journeys you're taking in your life right now and all the things that didn't work out and all the things that did work and the time it took you to get there. And if you had focused on a bigger picture, would that have reduced your travel time? Jeremiah 10:23 says, Lord, I know that people's lives are not their own. It is not for them to direct their steps. So the question I would love for you guys to ask yourselves tonight is, what is God's purpose for our lives? To be an engineer, to be a teacher, to be an attorney, to be a preacher, to be a musician, to be a nun, to be a priest. And when you answer that question, start to think to yourself, well, is that my calling? Am I called to be a teacher? Am I called to be a priest? Am I called to be a nun? Am I called to do this? Is this assignment that I'm doing teaching, preaching, engineering, working at the store, HEB, wherever it is that God's purpose for my life? Because I'll confess to you, I used to think that whatever I was doing has to be God's purpose because I prayed for it. So surely, since I prayed for this position, this has to be what God has me to do. This must be his purpose for my life. But let's talk about that. So I mentioned the word assignments earlier. Assignments are a little bit different than what I thought years ago. When I'm talking about an assignment, I'm talking about it refers to specific tasks or roles that you undertake in a particular context. It is what you are doing day to day. It is the tactical piece of your life. You are assigned to something. When I'm talking about purpose, it reflects the overarching meaning and the significance of your life and the impact you want to make in the world. So two totally different things. The reason I think that this is really important for us to grasp here is that your assignments may change over time, but your purpose will remain constant. So if you're finding yourself saying, well, my purpose has changed. No, your purpose never changed. Your assignment did. You was a teacher, now you're doing something else. You were doing this, but now you're doing something else. But your purpose, the reason it's so important to know your purpose is because it doesn't change. Dr. Miles Monroe, the late Dr. Miles Monroe, he said, when the purpose of a thing is unknown, abuse is inevitable. So if you don't know why you're here, you're going to end up doing all kind of crazy stuff and making all kind of crazy decisions. That's why it's so important to know your purpose. So with that said, Pastor Rod, Brandon, we all talked about the timeline of God establishing his compass, his North Star. We talked about Adam and Eve. So I'm going to go back over that just a little bit to remind us how that worked. And I'll need your interaction with me to help me through this. Genesis 1:28 says, then God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and govern it. Reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the animals that scurry along the ground. So we are talking about my main man, Adam, and his wife, Eve. So when we read that scripture, the first thing we see what God tells them is God blessed them. So his blessing is right here for us to enjoy. God blessed them. And then he told them to be fruitful and multiply. He said, go fill the earth. He was saying, extend my glory to all nations. So it's two things to that. We're all familiar with God bless me. God blessed me with a house. He blessed me with a spouse. God's been good to me. He healed me. My kids are doing well. Oh, God is so good. We're not always familiar with, and go and extend my glory to all nations piece. So we're not really incorrect. We're just incomplete. And what we want to do is get all of that together because essentially that's God's purpose for us. So as you go, and you know the story goes, Adam and Eve are there, and all of a sudden, the craziest thing happens. God has given them everything in the garden except one thing. And God tells them, don't touch that. And of course, when you say don't touch that to a child, what do? They touch it. Don't spill your milk, they're going to spill it. Don't eat in the TV room, they're going to eat in the TV room. That's just how they are. So Adam and Eve did the same thing. God told them, everything is yours. Don't touch that tree. And just like the enemy does, the enemy's big trick for all of us is deception. He got Adam and Eve to focus on the one thing that they lacked instead of all of the abundance that they had. So every morning when I get up, the first thing I do is I sit outside on our patio and I have my little notepad with me, and I do two things. Before I do my agenda, I have a grateful list. And I'm like, God, I'm so grateful for this. I'm so grateful for my children. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I'm so grateful for my CR family. And I just go through this whole list. And when I do that, it puts my mind into the right place where I can be appreciative of where God has me. I wish Adam and Eve had a grateful list. They didn't have that because they focused on the one thing that they lacked. And when they did that, everything went crazy. They were disconnected from God. You know, the weird thing that happened with that too, if you think about it, God actually told them. God said, Adam, where are you? God wasn't looking for Adam. God was letting Adam know, You're not where you're supposed to be. Adam was the one that was lost, not God. Adam didn't even know he was lost because he was disconnected from God. And at that point, everything just went downhill from there. All sorts of crazy stuff happened. And the craziest thing that happened, and this is why I really appreciate God, more so than what the average person might know. Because of all this stuff happening, what did God do? God said, I'm going to destroy mankind. I'm going to wipe everybody out. I'm going to find that one person, Noah, who's a God-fearing man, and his family, and I'm going to get my man Noah to build an ark, and he's going to take his family and all these animals, and he's going to save them. But the rest of mankind, I'm done. I'm out of here. You get on out of here. I'm done with them. And the crazy thing about that, when I thought of that, I said to myself, wow, it's amazing. Even God started over. Side note, why is it that when we make mistakes and do crazy stuff, the devil is talking to us and we feel like we can't start over? Why is it you can't start over with going back to where you know you need to be with God? And God himself started over with the entire human race. Just something you need to think about. If God can start over, you can start over too. So with that said, God now wipes everybody out, everybody but Noah and his family, and the flood is over. Noah and the boys and his family and everybody at the end of the flood, God says this eerily familiar thing to him in Genesis 9:1. He says, then God blessed Noah and his sons and told them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. What in the world? Is God on repeat? That's his second time saying that. Because if you remember, what did he say to Adam and Eve? He said, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth. Enjoy my blessings, because he blessed them just like he just blessed Noah. Then he said, fill the earth. Extend my glory all over the earth. So his purpose never changes. Keep in mind, enjoying God's blessings is good. Everybody loves that part. It's not incorrect, it's just incomplete. So you're not in God's purpose until you get to extend his glory in all the earth to all nations. So you're going to hear that a lot tonight, just in case. Why does he keep saying that? It must be important. So that's what I want you to take. So keep in mind, now this has happened. Noah and his family are there, and they fill the earth. Unfortunately, like men normally do, we can't get it right. Can't get right Noah and his people. The good thing about Noah and his people is that, yes, they did multiply. They did do that. However, instead of extending God's glory and filling the earth, they went to one place and told everyone, why don't we come together and build this temple, build this tower? And they built a tower to the sky, and they said our purpose in building this tower is to reach the heavens so that we can show everyone how great we are, so that we can take pride in the work we just did. Because we're just as good as anybody else. This is what we did. We're going to build to the heavens. This is our work. So you would think, well, what's wrong with that? They were one voice, one mind. If you think about it from a business perspective, we would all wish that everybody had one voice, one mind to get more stuff done. The problem with this is not what they did, it's why they did it. What happened when they did that? God now looks down from heaven, and what angers God is not that they built a tower. It was their ambition to get all the glory. Because remember, over here, experience and enjoy my blessings and extend my glory to all nations. They didn't extend God's glory. They wanted their own glory. That's why God was angry. And so what does God do? God now goes down and he confuses all the languages. They no longer now speak one language. They no longer can communicate to be one, to do all of this. And on top of that, God scatters everybody across the earth. He at least got that part done, right? He scatters everybody across the earth. Now, we got to figure out, we got all these people in different languages all around the earth. How in the world do we extend God's glory? How do we reach them? Thank God, God had a man. God always got a man. God always has a man. With the man that God has, God talked about, there's a guy whose name is Abram. Abram is the guy. And the thing about Abram, as you know, He eventually became father of many nations. But in the beginning, he was just Abram. So the reason I'm saying this is that if you look at what Abram was before we get into, and God called him and blessed him, Abram was just a part of his family. He lived in the city, I think the city was called Ur, near Mesopotamia, which is now Iran. In that particular city, the historians say Abram was a part of the commonplace. He could have been part of his family's business. He was doing all of that. But it was consistent in saying that Abram, loved God. He feared God. He worshiped God. So even in the city, he always represented who God was. That's what Abraham is. The reason I wanted to bring that out is because, once again, God does God-like things, and he calls on Abram. Boom, Abraham. In Genesis 12:1, the Lord had said to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. And this is probably not up there, but it goes on to say, I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great. You will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. And whoever curses you, I will curse you. And all the peoples on the earth will be blessed through you. I wanted to take that route because there was a disruption. Remember, he wasn't somewhere in the closet praying, God, what do you want me to do? He was busy in the commonplace. He was busy doing work with his family. And God disrupts him and tells him, you got to get up and get out of here. There's something I need you to do. Because now God has this master plan of how he's going to find a family who's going to be missionaries to the entire world. Abraham's family is that one. Notice in verse 2, he says, I will make you into a great nation. He didn't say I'll make you into a great family. He said a great nation. And then he says, whoever curses you, I will curse, and all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Remember that whole enjoying God's blessings, extending his glory to all nations. All of this is consistent. So you notice that North Star, or that compass that we're using here, is that consistent thing. So if you're wondering, well, Jay, what are you telling my purpose is? What is my purpose? Your purpose should be to enjoy God's blessings and extend his glory to all nations. Now, if you're like me, you're probably thinking, well, I do. I give money to missionary all the time. I've been doing this all my life at church. I see the missionary up on the top, in the front of the church, on that little brown board. We gave $500 last month, and it goes to someplace in Africa. We gave $2,000 last year, and it went to someplace in Soweto. That's not what I'm talking about. Because at the end of the day, all nations is actually all nations. It's not necessarily a physical place. We're talking about the people. So we just happen to live in the most diverse, one of the most diverse cities in the country. And all nations is actually right here. So imagine what that disruption would look like for us. Maybe I'm not being disrupted to leave my job and go to Soweto or Ethiopia. Maybe I'm not being disrupted to tell my family I'll be back 6 months. I'm going to go across the sea for 6 months and help these struggling people. Maybe my disruption is I'm going to get out of my own neighborhood and I'm going to go over to the Buddhist temple. What would happen if I went to a Muslim mosque? What would happen if I went to a neighborhood in this city of Houston that was full of people who didn't look like me, who didn't believe like me, who had a different God than I had? What if that disruption was like that? Because now you're talking about something you can do, but you probably don't know how. You still got to take that step, right? Everybody, even Abraham, had to take a step. Remember, he didn't even know where he was going, and God told him to leave. Remember with Mother Teresa, she didn't know that she was going to leave the convent to get to Calcutta, but God told her to go. I didn't even know I was going to be here in Texas until God said, get out the boat, man. So what is God telling you? There's a disruption going on right now in your life. You probably can't put your finger on it, but you know it's bigger than you. So your purpose can't be your job. Your purpose can't even be your family. Your purpose can't be your title. Your purpose can't be your kids. Your purpose has to be enjoy the blessings of God and extend his glory. Everything inside of that are your assignments. Assignments are important, but assignments change. There's seasons. So that's why sometimes I refer to things, assignments, as seasons. You're in a certain season right now. So as I wrap this up, one of the things I love to do is leave you with something. So I wanted to give you 3 things that God will disrupt when he calls you. Number 1 are firmly laid plans. This means that, remember with Abraham, he shared his beliefs every day in a commonplace. God will disrupt it. God will disrupt the fact that you are part of a small group. God will disrupt the fact that you go to this church. God will disrupt the fact that you're a part of whatever organization that you are a part of that takes your time, and he will have you do something different. Family connections. He told Abraham, leave your relatives. God will make you leave your relatives. All of my family is in North Carolina. My wife's family is actually in Michigan. We knew nobody in Texas when we got here. You're going to have to leave your relatives. And in familiar territories, you're going to have to leave your familiar areas and the places that you've always been. Sometimes we feel that I'm a part of this group, I'm a part of that group. I'm going to do this because this is what I'm used to. God will have you leave that thing. And finally, the 3 things that I want you to take, 3 additional things would be 3 things that God needs from us. The first one is unwavering trust. Remember, to take that first step, you're not going to know. You just got to take the step. I often think of the first step as the hardest, but the truth of the matter is the next step is probably the hardest thing ever. Because after you take the first step, you're like, oh, that wasn't as bad. But the next step, I don't see anything. Unforeseen readiness. This applies to those disruptions. You've got to be ready when God says move. That's going to hinder some of us. It hindered me. I think I should have been in Texas 5 years before I got here. But I wasted time, and I kind of pity-patted around, and I said, no, but the money's here. God, if you're not going to force me, I'm going to stay here. I can make it work. But you're going to have to be ready for unforeseen readiness, those disruptions that come. And finally, upholding God's global mission, which is, on this hand, tell me what that is again. Enjoying God's blessings, experiencing God's blessings. And the second part of that, extending God's glory. Exactly right. It's not incorrect, it's just incomplete. Does that make sense? Thank you, guys.